Peter Parker spent 4 years disappearing on purpose. And Marvel just confirmed that disappearance was never the end of his story. It was the setup for something much bigger. When Kevin Feige sat down with Collider and confirmed that Spider-Man Brand New Day takes place before Avengers Doomsday, it sounded like a small scheduling detail. It wasn't. That single sentence closed off one theory and opened up a far more interesting one. Because if Brand New Day happens before Doomsday, and Peter Parker still isn't in the Doomsday cast list, that means Marvel deliberately chose to keep its most bankable hero out of its biggest team-up movie of the year. Studios don't accidentally bench Spider-Man, they save him for something. So the real question isn't what happens in Brand New Day, it's what Brand New Day is quietly building toward. Start with where Peter actually is when this movie begins. 4 years have passed since No Way Home. Doctor Strange's spell didn't just erase Peter's identity from the world's memory, it erased Peter from his own support system. Every person who used to catch him when he fell doesn't know he exists. Merge, Ned, Happy, they've all moved on, living lives that no longer have room for a friend they can't remember. Peter chose that outcome to protect them. And for 4 years, he's been quietly living with the cost of that choice, alone, full-time, as Spider-Man and nothing else. That isolation is the actual engine of this film. It's not a plot device, it's a psychological pressure cooker. And Marvel has paired that pressure with something physical. The marketing has leaned hard into imagery of bodily change, of Peter's abilities shifting into something new and less controllable. When you put those two ideas together, total isolation plus a body that's starting to change on its own, you get a very specific kind of story. Not a story about a hero saving the day, a story about a hero on the edge of becoming someone else entirely. That's not an accident. It's the exact emotional territory the comic run this movie is named after was built on. The 2008 Brand New Day storyline followed a Peter whose entire support system had been erased in a single reality-altering deal, forcing him to rebuild his identity from nothing. The MCU version swaps the mechanism. Strange's spell instead of a deal with Mephisto, but keeps the emotional core almost identical. A Peter Parker with no safety net, figuring out who he is when nobody's watching. Now layer in who Marvel put in his orbit for this chapter. John Bernthal's Punisher isn't a cameo, he's a mirror. Frank Castle represents the version of vigilante justice Peter has spent his entire life refusing to become, someone who stopped drawing lines. Pairing them together isn't just a fun team-up for the trailer. It's Marvel showing us the fork in the road. One path keeps Peter who he's always been, the other path is the one the marketing keeps hinting at. And then there's Mark Ruffalo's Hulk. SDCC footage confirmed Spider-Man teams up with Smart Hulk, the merged, controlled Banner personality, against a threat that pushes Bruce back towards something more dangerous. On the surface, that's just a fun superhero team-up beat, but narratively, it's doing something sharper. It's establishing that even Bruce Banner, a man who spent years achieving internal balance, can still be pushed past it. If that can happen to Banner, the door is wide open for it to happen to Peter by the end of the film. Which brings us to the villain question, because Marvel has been unusually careful about what it's shown here. Tombstone has been confirmed since casting, but kept almost entirely out of trailers, a deliberate choice for a movie this heavily marketed. Scorpion is back, and reporting points to an upgraded version of the character. And looming over both of them is Kingpin's criminal empire, described as resurgent, meaning Wilson Fisk's operation survived Daredevil's world and is now expanding straight into Spider-Man's city. That's 3 separate criminal threats converging on one isolated hero with a body that's starting to betray him. Marvel rarely stacks that many pieces on the board without a reason. The most consistent explanation across reporting is that this isn't really a story about beating one villain. It's a story about Peter getting squeezed from every direction until something in him breaks, and the film deciding what he becomes on the other side of that. Now here's where it gets genuinely interesting for the future of the franchise, and where we have to be careful to separate what's confirmed from what's still theory. Sadie Sink's role has been kept almost completely under wraps, and that silence has fueled one of the most persistent fan theories of the year, that she's playing an MCU version of Jean Grey. This is not confirmed by Marvel, but it's worth explaining why the theory exists at all. Reports describing psychic imagery and mind control adjacent visuals in test footage lines up with exactly how Marvel has historically teased mutant abilities before officially confirming a character. If it's true, Brand New Day wouldn't just be closing Peter's isolation arc. It would be quietly opening the MQ's X-Men era in the middle of a Spider-Man movie, months ahead of Avengers. Doomsday bringing the Fox-verse X-Men into the picture directly. That would explain something else that's been puzzling fans. Why Feige confirmed this film happens before Doomsday, but Spider-Man himself doesn't appear to be part of that movie's ensemble. If Brand New Day is secretly doing double duty, closing one saga thread while opening another, then keeping it structurally separate from Doomsday's ensemble cast makes complete sense. Marvel isn't skipping Spider-Man. It's positioning him, and that positioning points somewhere specific. Avengers, Secret Wars. Multiple reports have described Brand New Day as the film that shapes where Peter stands heading into that story, rather than Doomsday. That tracks with everything the timeline confirms. Peter spends this movie rebuilding an identity and possibly gaining new power in near-total isolation. Secret Wars, by its comic book nature, is a multiversal collision, the exact kind of story that rewards a hero who's already been forced to question who he is. Then there's the ending itself, which reporting has been careful not to overstate. No official post-credits scene has been confirmed, but the most consistent detail across multiple sources points toward a tease, setting up a future confrontation between Peter and Wilson Fisk, not resolving it, just planting it. That would track with everything Kingpin's resurgent empire framing has already suggested throughout the marketing. Other rumored directions, like a symbiote tease or a Doctor Doom connection, show up far less consistently and should be treated as exactly that, rumors, not conclusions. Zoom out, and a clear shape starts to form. Marvel spent 4 MCU films building Peter Parker from a kid borrowing someone else's suit into a fully isolated hero with nothing left to lose. Brand New Day isn't the finale of that arc. It's the hinge. Whatever Peter becomes by the end of this film, physically, emotionally, maybe even in what team he's aligned with, is what walks into Secret Wars. And that's really what Brand New Day means here. Not a soft reboot, not a clean slate, a forced evolution built entirely out of everything Peter lost by choosing to protect the people he loves. Marvel didn't erase Peter Parker's story 4 years ago. It's been quietly writing the next chapter the entire time, and Brand New Day is where we finally see the first page.